And now why this list bucket is important. See, this is important because we are trying to see it in action via console.
Shut up and sit down.
Hi, in this video, we'll be seeing IAM policies and S3 bucket policy in AWS account. So let me share the screen. What we'll do here is that this is an AWS account where I'm logged in as a root user, and I have this user who is a noob user, and this user has no permissions whatsoever to do anything in this account, right? It's just a user. And I've also created an S3 bucket in this account. So if you can go to S3 and buckets, you will see that I've created an S3 bucket here, which is Infinite Hacks bucket. It's not a public bucket and it has an image. So now if I'm logged in as a user, a noob user, here, when I go to buckets, I'll see that there is no bucket visible, right? Because you don't have permissions to list the buckets. So what I'll do in this particular video is that we'll give this noob user the right to read objects in the bucket, but only the right to read the objects, right? Not the right to edit or write or do anything. So the first thing we'll do is for letting this user to list all the buckets on the account. And for that, we'll be creating an IAM policy. So let's do that first so that the person is able to at least list the buckets, not even read the objects, just listing the bucket. So we'll go to the root account because here I can create policies. So I'll go to IAM policies and let me create a policy which is letting a user to list the buckets. So you go to create policy and I'll select a service S3. So what we are doing right now is create a custom AWS policy. And I'll only allow list. Okay, so I'll not even list, I'll just allow list all my buckets. Okay, and then you can go here next, and you create the policy. You will name the policy list all buckets, just S3 because it is S3, and you create the policy. So now this will create the IAM policy. You can read it here. What it is doing is it's allowing whosoever user has attached this policy to list all the buckets. And it works on all the resources, like it works on all the S3 buckets. So now let me go to the users, and here in permissions, I'll see that the noob user has no permissions right now. So I'll add a permission and let me attach a policy here. So I'll just do list all S3 buckets, this one. So you just attach this policy. So now the policy is attached to this user. Let's switch our accounts now. Let's log in as the user and then see what I can see. So earlier I was not able to list any buckets, but now when I'll refresh, it shows me the bucket. So now I'm able to know that at least this kind of a bucket exists. But note that we cannot do anything else with the bucket. It is just listing the bucket, that because that is the only permission that I've allowed. So we have a cat image, but we are not able to see it here, right? So let me switch back to the user account, the root account. And now what I'll try to do is letting the user list the objects in the bucket. But I will not do that by creating an IAM policy. Just to understand how different policies exist, let us try to do that using an S3 bucket policy. So I go to the bucket, and here you can see that in permissions, there are no policies attached. So let me create a policy here, an S3 bucket policy. Now, I will do that using policy generator. If you're comfortable in JSON, you can start and type your way away, but I'll just do that using policy generator. So policy generator allows me to define different kind of policies. Here I'm picking up S3 bucket policy. The effect is allow. And this bucket policy can be really granular. So I can allow access to a particular user to this bucket. So what I'll do here is that I'll enter the principal of that user. So when I go to the users in my main account, here when you go to users, you can see that every user, like every other resource on AWS, has an ARN, right? So it identifies that resource uniquely. So this is the user ARN, which is the principal here. AWS services Amazon S3, and what do I want to do? I want the user to list the objects in the bucket, right? So not list all the buckets, get objects in the bucket, right? So there are a lot of different actions. Now be aware that not all of these actions will be applicable. It doesn't tell you upfront that only these actions will work with this kind of resource. So you need to be conscious of choosing the right thing here, right? So what I'll do is just get object, because that is what I'm interested in. And ARN, now this one would be the buckets ARN, right? So just like every other resource, even S3 bucket will have its own ARN. So I need to define the buckets ARN here. So when you click here and you copy ARN, the bucket ARN is copied, and now you can paste it. Now, if you do generate policy, this is the policy that is created. So now you can very conveniently copy and paste it. Now there is a catch here that I'll show you in a while. How can you attach the policy? Just go to the bucket here, and when you go to the bucket, you go to the permissions. You'll see the bucket policy here. I edit it, and here I'll just delete all of this and paste this. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you try to save it as is, it would not work. Let's do that. Save changes, it doesn't work. Why? Because it's saying action does not apply to any resource in the statement. And what is the action? The action is get object. And it does not apply on the resource, the bucket, because you cannot get a bucket. You can list a bucket. Get object is for objects defined within the bucket. So what I'll do is I want the user to see all the objects in the bucket. So I'll do /start. And now when I try to save it, this is saved successfully, right? So what has happened as a result of this policy is that the noob user should now be having access to get the objects inside the bucket. So let's go to the noob user's account and see what happens now here. So as we saw before, we were able to list the bucket, but not able to get objects. So let's click on the bucket and see what happens. So you'll see that we are still not able to see the objects, and you might wonder why. So we just give the get object permission. So it shows you a message. It says that you do not have S3 list bucket action. And this is something that you have to keep in mind, that in AWS, all the different permissions, they work together, right? So just in the simple flow of seeing an object, there are a lot of different permissions into play. So you need to know what all permissions you would need to give to that user in order to access. So it says that you should add get list bucket as well. We just have get object here. So let's edit it. Now we'll go to the policy generator again. And now this time I'll add another action. So allow it to list this bucket, right? So you have an action here. A good idea would be to just go through all the different functions available and get some idea of what are the different functions available. But here I have given the permission to list the bucket. Now I generate the policy. So this is how the new policy looks like. And now you can copy it. And when I come back here, you add it here. Make sure that you have this, and let's save it. So now you see that we have provided this user permission to get objects, all objects from this bucket, and also to list the bucket. And now why this list bucket is important. See, this is important because we are trying to see it in action via console. So all the features in this console is mapped to a permission in the background, right? So when I go to Amazon S3 and all the buckets appear here, we are using the list all buckets permission. And if that permission is given, only then I can see this. Now, that doesn't mean that you do not have the ability to get the object from the bucket. You can do that. You can do that directly using command line. But if you are relying on console to make all the changes, you would need to add the permission so that you can see it, right? So now when we click on this bucket, you are able to see the object, right? So all the permissions in IAM and the bucket policy coming together to let this happen on your AWS console. Now you can also open it because that is what the get object is for, and you can see it happening in action. So that was what the video was about. If you have any questions, put it down in the comment. I did this as a part of a blog post, which was trying to compare bucket policies, IAM policies, and access control list. And I'll be linking the blog post also in the description. So go have a look at it and let me know if you have any doubts. Hope you liked it. That's all. Thank you.